Sitecore user group Bulgaria co-organizer Rosen Petrov. So Rosen, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So today I'll be speaking about Sitecore Experience Analytics reports in the context of development. So it will be focused mainly for developers. Let's start with short intro about who am I. I've been working with the Sitecore platform since version 7.2, and I've basically been certified for each major version. You can follow me on Twitter, and there you can find my blog posts. Currently I'm employed by FFW agency. What are we going to cover today? First, we'll start with what actually are the analytics reports in Sitecore. Then we'll move to how they work in order to understand how we can create our custom reports in the future, if we need that. And during this process, we'll learn some terms and naturally bridge the gap between marketers and developers, or at least at some point. And of course I'll have some demos and examples on what I'm going to talk. So what are Sitecore Experience Analytics reports? By definition, from the Sitecore documentation, they provide dashboards and reports for marketers and marketing analysts to identify patterns and trends in the experience data. This means that actually the reports help us and our clients to analyze how users engage with a website. This information can help you analyze the amount of traffic on your website as well as the quality of that traffic. And let's see what we are talking about, because it's not good to have only theory here. Basically, after we install Sitecore XP version of the platform, we get the analytics enabled, and we can see this marketing application section in the Launchpad. And this is our experience analytics application. When we open it, we see different categories of our reports, like dashboard. Each category has like dashboard, audience, acquisition, behavior, etc. And each of them contains different charts and graphs which provide useful information about our users. Just quickly about the categories there. First, I won't focus and I won't go too deep into the details, because this is not the main focus here right now. But the dashboard basically provides an overview of the key analytics, and it displays selection of the most important charts from the different categories. The audience provide information, help you understand who your visitors are, where they're coming from, like which country, which city, from which device, and things like that. The acquisition gives information of what is driving traffic to your website. Are these users coming from a campaign or something similar? The behavior, analyze the behavior of your visitors on the website, like where they're browsing and stuff. And the conversions provide information about percentage of visitors that achieve a particular goal. It could be downloading some asset or something else. And so we saw what we have already there, and now I'll move to the point to check how we can create custom Sitecore reports. And a little small background here. I was given a task to investigate if this is possible and how we could do that for a client, and how my journey went and how we are going to go in the next slides is basically I've started with an example. So I got one of the existing reports, I checked how it works. This is what we are going to do in the next slides. You see that at some point you hit, maybe, or some of you, at least me, hit a wall, and you need to learn some terms there in order to proceed. And of course, in the end, we will code it, and yeah, the 4 is why I'm here, share the knowledge. So the customer experience analytics reports and how they work. I'll move back to this slide, but I want to first show these things in Sitecore. So let's choose one page here. Let's say the devices one in the audience category, and start investigating on how these things actually work. As a key point here, we should know that every page is basically created here in the core database, and it's placed under the client, applications, experience analytics, dashboard item. So this is the root. The dashboard is actually the dashboard page we get as a landing page when you open the application. And just when we browse here in the, so here we can see all of the pages, and just exploring the content tree we can see some similarities on the pages. Like for example, each page is based on the just a second. Yeah, each page is based on the speak page layout, on the speak page template, and talking about the presentation details, you see that I'm not on the right thing. Just a second. So it's based on the speak dashboard page, and the presentation details, they're all of these pages use the speak layout. They have some common structural components which build the page layout, and just here at the bottom we can see the actual charts as a components. And another common thing is that under each page we have devices, we have a page settings item, and under this item we have different data sources where our components pull their data. So that's what we can understand from the core database. And as a beginning, we can summarize all of this to the point where we already know that to create a custom report, we have to create a new page in the core database based on the speak dashboard page template, pick our chart component and add the component on the page, create the parameters template based on the exact component type, chart type we have used. And there, in this, we'll see that in the demo after that, on the parameters item, which is used for a data source, we have two fields, metrics and segments, which basically controls how our data is and which exactly data is pulled and displayed on the reports. As a rule of thumbs is that like best practice is to, if you want to, when you want to create a custom page with reports, The best practice is to duplicate an existing one and start modifying it and change and configure the data sources in order to pull the right data. So when we talking about these steps, everything looks pretty simple, like Sitecore, items, templates, data sources, components, nothing new, nothing complex. Maybe when you want to pick the right chart, you have a small challenge because there is no documentation which shows how each chart looks. That's why I just prepared for reference a couple of slides listing all of the chart components. And actually the most challenging thing is the point where you should configure the data source for these components, the metrics and the segments fields, because this needs some kind of understanding of what you're choosing there and how these things work. So the next slides cover the different types of charts. This is just for reference. If you want to create a new page with charts, you can come here and check and choose the right one when you build your page. Let's move to the terms because this is the most challenging thing you will meet eventually when you create your reports. And let's start with the dimension in Sitecore and what it is. So the dimension basically is it describes the data. Think of a dimension as describing the what, as in what city is the visitor from, or what pages were viewed. From a development perspective, we think about the dimension as a grouping of the data. So you have different attributes on your data, and then you say, I want to group it by city, and then all users and visitors coming from Sofia or Copenhagen, they will be grouped. The dimension puts this description on the data, and this is what it means. After that we have the segment, and the segment is kind of instantiation of the dimension. It controls also which data is going to be presented in that group. By default they contain all of the data in the parent dimension, and you should know that actually this is the segment is the thing you use when you bind your report to. So every time you create a dimension in Sitecore, it comes with a default segment there, like all visits from city, let's say. The next one is the metrics, and the metrics are all about measuring the data. Think about the metric as answering how many or how long, as in how many visits or how long a visitor was on the site. In Sitecore there are 7 standard metrics that measure the different attributes on each dimension. These are visit, value, page views, time on site, bounces, conversion, and count. I won't go deeper into details in these terms right now. And filters and rules. I already mentioned that the segments are kind of instantiations of the dimensions, and there you can apply different filtering. So the filter and rules are actually the way you apply these filters. I'll show you now in Sitecore, because all of these terms which I just described, all of them are available as items in Sitecore. Let's just open the marketing control panel, and when it loads, I'll show you where the dimensions are. Sorry, I'm into the core. Yeah, I'm into the core database. Yeah. So we're into the marketing control panel, and here under experience analytics, we see the dimensions here, and they are basically grouped, but we have, as I said, kind of groupings. These are the dimensions by asset group. It could be by channel, city, and etc. And just under the dimension, we have our segment. And all of them, as you see, come with a default one, which basically pulls all of the data. And here on the segment, we have our filter field. And here you can choose a filter. Right now I don't have any filters, but you can choose a filter which will filter the data. And all of the filters are created here, so you can insert a new one when you need. Just for the demo, I will create one. And in the filter, you use this rule field and this rule set editor to configure your actual filtering. So this is how it looks into Sitecore. All of the terms have their representation here into Sitecore. Let's move further. So now when we already saw how the actual pages, the report pages are created, and when we saw the actual items like the segments and the filters and stuff, we can think about a flow of development of the experience analytics reports. I would say that the left part is kind of investigation, start of a process of investigation. You're given a task, and then the first thing you should do is just go and check what you already have there. Like, do you have something similar as a report already, or based on your findings, you could fall in three cases. The first one could be that you cannot find what you need. There is no such group or such kind of dimension, similar report. Then you need to create a custom Sitecore dimension and build this part by yourself. But you could also have some cases when you have a dimension that fits your needs, but not have the proper the proper segment. What that means is that, let's say you have group, say a dimension which says visits by city, but you want to filter a bit more and say, show me how the males or females from this city, how many visits they have on the website. So this is the case when you can create a custom filter and just create another segment there and use it in your report. The other case is when you have a report based on the segment you need, but you need another metrics there. For example, you want to render not the visit count, the visits, but the value per visit or something like that. This is pretty simple because you just duplicate the whole report, and then you can go and change only the metrics on the data source of the component item of the component. And the final stage here is when you, so here we are talking about the preparation of the data, and the final stage is when we need to visualize our data. So as a best practice, I already said that, is to duplicate an existing report which fits your needs and then configure it. And what I'm going to do right now is that I will create a custom Sitecore dimension, which is maybe the most complex of all of the cases. And when you think about it, maybe you say, oh, this is simple, or maybe there is information about it. The key point here is that There is something new into Sitecore 9, and when you Google for the custom dimensions, let's say, or stuff like that, you find obsolete or old information there. So it's not well documented and it's the new thing is the flexible dimension. And maybe some of you have noticed, but here when we look into the dimensions, we see that they are kind of duplicated, and that's because we have the old version like the dimension and the new one, the flexible dimension. We can easily see that here in the config file in Sitecore, where every dimension is registered. Basically, you will see that the old dimensions are already marked as obsolete into the comment. So it's good to go with the new way when you want to create new dimensions and new reports. That's what I'm going to show you now. So yeah, here in the config file, so let's start with here. Every dimension, actually let's start with what we are going to build. We want to build a custom report which displays all visits by operating system. So we don't have this right now, and we know that we will need a custom dimension, like custom grouping by operating system. And let's start with the config file. So we know that, yeah, basically .pik is your best friend here because it's not documented, and that's why I've started with the examples and the config file just to see how the others are registered. So we know that we need a registration of our dimension, and how this registration actually should look is something, it's like that. Like it has a connection to the actual item which we are going to create in the next steps. And here we have the generic class flexible dimension, which we need to basically we need to provide here two models. And if we check in .pik just what the generic says, we'll see that the two models we provide here is actually the output model and kind of input information as a second generic parameter. And basically what is going on here is that we are saying, all right, we have some data coming from somewhere, I want to process it and aggregate some output. And the actual models are just in my example, the actual models, so the output would be our metric. So we will need a new metric because, as I said, the metric measures the data. So this is logical to be our output. So the first parameter here in the flexible dimension generic class is the operating system metrics. So we have our new metric, we should create it, and when we go into .pik, we'll find out that it needs to inherit from this base class and implement this interface, and then implement the merge with, which basically here you need to provide a logic of how each of the parameters should be merged and combined. And because we care only about the visits, here we have only one property called visits. If we proceed here investigating the config registration, you see that, so we need our input data, and actually our input data is the XConnect collection model operating system data, we know that, or we'll find that we should check what we already have in XConnect. And I found out that there we have a web facet where we have information about the operating system data. So this is the input which I will use. And we need to, so here when we check the generic type, let me see where it is. So yeah, this class has a couple of constructors, and basically we are interested only in the first one because the others are just not usable because this iComposer class is internal, so we cannot implement this thing. So we need to pass basically two things here, and the first one is the group resolver, and then we need to pass a fact calculator in order to build our custom dimension. And let's check what we have there. So the group resolver class basically takes care for, let's say we have our interaction. By the way, the interaction in the terms of in the context of Sitecore is every point of which contact interfaces with the brand. It could be offline or online through the website or buying something into the store. This is treated as an interaction, and this is something specific to XConnect, and it's another topic basically. But here we have an interaction context. Here we are in the aggregation process of our data, and we have this interaction coming into the interaction as part of the interaction aggregation context. And this class here, the resolver, basically takes care for defining the group, resolving the group based on the data we get there. So we here in our example we get the operating system from the web visit facet, but you can also here you could have scenarios when you want to read different events or different facets, and I just put a couple of hints where you can find stuff with .click. And during the resolving of the group, we need to build the key, the ID of the group based on our data. So this is our method which resolves the key. What I saw during my investigations is that at some situations here, Sitecore has some serializers which just take an entity and then using JSON serialization return different string, let's say. So you could have this, but just for simplicity I just used that. So this is the why we have the group resolver and what it actually does. The fact calculator is the second parameter here in our registration, and the fact calculator actually needs to calculate, it's responsible for calculating our metrics values depending on our input data there. So here, because every interaction basically is treated as one visit, we don't have much to calculate here, so we just assign it to one. But you may have another situations where you want to track different download events, how many assets have been downloaded and stuff like that. And you here also use the interaction aggregation context to pulling this data when you need it. And actually, if we check the config file, we see here that we have these interaction filters, and basically all of them just implement this interaction filter exclude from aggregation. This means that these are presented on all of the custom on all of the available flexible dimensions, and they basically exclude some internal Sitecore interactions which should not be tracked. So this is something we just need to register here. And yeah, it would be too easy if we just implement these classes. Actually, when I was trying to do that, I hit the wall because I got to the point where I got an exception because some SQL tables were missing, so I contacted the support and stuff. So after that I realized, and I got information that we also need to create a custom table in our reporting database in order to store this information, these new metrics. And here I marked what is actually required there, because all of these rows into our custom table are required, and we put our own, which is from the operating system metrics. So let's just create this table. We need to execute the script onto the reporting database, as I said, which will create the new table where our metrics, the new metrics, will be stored. All right, so we are good with that. And so this is the implementation, or like the code implementation. We have one more thing that we need to do. The first thing is to actually create our dimension here into Sitecore. So as I said, we could just duplicate one of the existing dimensions here, like by device model, and call it by operating system. Let's just no, actually I duplicated the old version of the flexible dimension, but the dimension, just a second. So this is the flexible dimension, so we need to create the item here, so duplicating some other dimension. Here it's important because here in this field metric type we should put the exact name of the class we have created for our new metric, which is operating system metrics. And it's also important actually that this name here is used in our SQL script when we create the table. Like here, it should be exact same name. This is something very tricky and not very intuitive. So let's configure that thing right now and change some of the text here. And because we don't care about other metrics except the visits, let's move everything out from this field and save our item. We should also take care for the segment here, so we need to change some titles. And very important thing, we should go and get the ID of the newly created item, the dimension. So here it is, because this ID should be put here in the config file, which is registering our new dimension. Alright, so we have created our dimension into Sitecore. Now the other thing is that we need to take care for our presentation, so we need to create the actual page. And because here we have speak applications, and that's why we need to use Sitecore Rocks. So here we are going to the core database again. We have the applications, experience analytics, dashboard, and we'll use our devices page there. We'll just duplicate this one. Yeah, this is this is Rocks. Operating systems. Let's clean a bit this thing, because here we have some nested page which we don't care about, so we'll just delete it. And because we made a duplication, there are some data sources which are currently broken, so let's go and fix that. Like they point to the devices data sources where we duplicate it from. So for example, this one for the filters, we should change it to point to the right place right now after we made the duplication. So we have the operating systems, page settings. As I said, under page settings are all of the data sources and configurations. And the most important thing is, so on that page there are two charts, but I don't need both of them, so I'll remove the second one, and I'll use only the line chart. And let's configure the right data source here of that line chart, which will be all right. Let's see if it will load, or I'll have to close and open again Visual Studio. All right, so let's change to the right data source. It's this one here. Let's save it, and let's move to the actual data source and configure our data there. So this is the right data source, the line chart one, and here you have our data section, basically, where these are the two important properties, the two important fields, the metrics. We want to measure the visits, so this will stay like that. But about the dimensions, we'll change this one and use our custom dimension which we just created. Oh, yeah, here it is. I haven't renamed the item, but that's fine. Here I also have to rename many other titles, like you see here you have device types. You should rename this stuff to your custom titles you need, but we will leave that for now. So we have configured the most important things right now, like the data section. So we choose the new dimension and the metric. Basically we are done with our configuration, and we can publish our code to the web root. All right, let's wait now. Sitecore to spin. it's very important to know that when you create new segments here and dimensions, you should always deploy your marketing definitions, especially the segments, and I'll show you now where you should do that, because otherwise you won't get any data there. It's done through the control panel. When Sitecore loads, I'll show that. So we'll deploy our segments because we've created new ones, and Sitecore needs to be aware of that in order to aggregate our new data. Maybe while we are waiting, I could mention that we'll use X generator for generating some dummy experience data here. It's a very useful tool, like it's a module which you could install within Sitecore, and you could configure some properties there and generate some dummy visits on your website. But unfortunately, it's not very well documented, and it's a bit tough to use it.
Does it work with 9 already?
Yeah, it works. And this is actually 9.1.1, the latest.
I remember it was not working at some point. So.
Yeah, could be. So we need to deploy our marketing definitions now, and it's done through the control panel. This is also a required step once you install Sitecore. At the beginning, you should deploy your marketing definitions. This is a post-installation step. So when you update them, you also need to redeploy what you have updated. So we need only the segments here, because we created a new segment. And now we will use X generator to generate some visits on our website, and I'll show you actually how it looks.
Oh wait, is it possible to make the segment work on the historical data as well?
Yeah, that's a bit tricky. You need to rebuild the reporting database. That's how it works from what I understood, because actually I registered. There is one config which enables some kind of reaggregation, and you could check that. I tried, and it looks like the same to me, like reaggregating the data, but actually it's not, and you should investigate in that direction. But as I understood, you should rebuild the reporting database. That's the way.
So just like 20 days for rebuilding.
yeah, if you have a lot of data. So the experience generator, we won't configure anything specific here. We just need some dummy data. So we'll start generating our visits right now, and it will take like 2-3 minutes, or usually it takes so. And then we can go and check our report. But from my tests, it also needs a couple of minutes while the data is aggregated. So maybe we will be able to see any actual data after like 5-10 minutes. So maybe we could we could stop, and if you have any questions, we can discuss them while waiting, and in the end we'll just check if everything works. And yeah, I've tested it many times, so believe me. So do you have any questions? It's very I don't know, in my opinion it's complex, a bit confusing, and there are a lot of information here. It was hard to yeah.
Can't you achieve that by using filter instead of isn't there already a segment that is collect? I mean, operating system is a pretty big deal, so I guess there must be a segment that already collects it.
This is only an example right now. If I have to be honest, I haven't explored everything we have there, but I think that we don't have the exact dimension by operating system. XConnect has a lot of stuff there, like different facets, a lot of information, and not all of this information is represented in the reports. So in this situation, maybe you need to create, and the point was to show how to create the custom dimension.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You were showing a demo about creating custom dimensions, but do you have any experience in creating custom metrics? Let's say the percentage of scrolling down the page, or like percentage.
Yeah. That's very good question, and based on my research, I found out that Sitecore, or at least because I found resources which are 2 years old, let's say, doesn't support extending on the metrics point, like creation of custom metrics. So if you have this scenario, then it would be very hard to accomplish it, because you need to extend some very core functionalities of Sitecore. That's what I think, but if I have to be honest, I'm not 100% sure about the latest version, because there I see a very flexible creation of the classes. We saw there you can register your own properties, then you register the whole new table, which makes sense that you can extend this thing right now, but I should check that after the presentation.
Adding counter question, is it possible to segment by facets of the X profile? Operating system is usually coming from X profile, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So is it actually segmenting on the facet itself, connected to the visit, or is it segmenting on something else?
Yeah, it is segmented on the facet, on the data. So you need the data coming from somewhere which you will use to group. So in our case, we use XConnect because this is the.
So in theory, basically, if you have a custom facet, you can store your custom metric there, and you can segment it in that case. So it's probably possible. Yeah, exactly. This is from the other side, actually. That's why I would say that right now I know the half of it. Let's say I know how to present the data. So the other part is how to extend the XConnect portion, like how you could track anything else there, adding new facets, and then use them in the reports. This is maybe another presentation at some point. Yeah. So we generated this thing, and let's see if we have our report page. So we have it here. Let's see if it throws exceptions or. So yeah, currently it still says no data, but I think that it just needs a couple of minutes and. By the way, it might have been cached. Can you open it in a new window, in a form tab?
I know what you mean.
The date is older. It's always like this one date.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'll change the date also, and we will see if it's not there. We can.
Speak dates are usually heavily cached on these reports.
Last year, but I don't think that this will make a difference actually, because it generates visits on the exact date. So maybe it will need a couple of more minutes, and we could see it. But yeah, we could stop here, I think, or if you have any other questions, we can discuss them. All right. Thanks.
I've seen it works.
It works with my machine.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.